Dane Brugler is a NFL draft expert for The Athletic. He puts out big boards, mock drafts leading up to the draft, and he has insider knowledge. He talks to teams. He talks to scouts. He evaluates the players on his own. He takes all that information, he compiles it, and he puts it into his product, the mock drafts and the big boards. He just released a big board update. Drake Maye, number 1 overall. Drake Maye, UNC quarterback, fresh off losses to UVA and Georgia Tech, jumps to number 1 overall. Now, why would this happen? First of all, let me do the cynical thing here. If you had Caleb Williams as your number 1, and you wanted to keep him as your number 1, and you wanted to keep him as your number 1, I'm not sure how many people would keep clicking on your big boards as you release big board 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. If you're just like, nope, nothing's changed. Still think the same thing. Top 32, identical. People are going to stop visiting your site. So part of it is you do have to change it, right? The best example I have of this is Mel Kiper is connected, okay? He's a similar style mock drafter. At one point in time, a couple of years ago, he had Johnny Manziel going number 1 overall. I think that was purely so people would go, number 1 overall, let me click on this link, right? It was like he does, 9 mock drafts, like mock draft 5.0 had Johnny Manziel number 1 overall. Number 6 and number 4 had him, in the 20s. It's like, all right, one of these is not like the others. I think you were pulling my leg. So part of it, partially, is I do think you have to mix it up. You have to change it up just to get clicks. Not accusing Dane Brugler of anything nefarious, just saying that's part of the business that you have to take into account. The other thing is, I think the way the NFL is playing out this year is really helping Drake Maye. I think Justin Herbert is really helping Drake Maye. Justin Herbert's playing well, looking good, doing what the people expect when you get those gigantic contracts. And guess what? The number 1 comparison for Drake Maye is Justin Herbert. Big, tall, strong, laser rocket arm, those types of things. Comes from a school with a very, very deep connection to Nike, Oregon and UNC. Different connections, Jordan Brand versus Phil Knight in Oregon. But you get what I'm saying. I think C.J. Stroud is really helping Drake Maye. Right? Because if you looked at last year's draft, you had the cerebral, extending plays with his feet, throwing on the run, maybe a little undersized player in Bryce Young. And then you had the more traditional, tall, pocket passing, kind of exactly the measurables you look for in C.J. Stroud. And C.J. Stroud is, quite frankly, outplaying Bryce Young so far. That's not to say he will forever, but it's a what have you done for me lately business. Scouts are looking at it going, all right, we have Caleb Williams, play extending, throwing on the run, creative, or we have the more traditional, big, tall, strong, laser rocket arm Drake Maye. We just had this decision last year, and they're going with Drake. Which I guess you could argue Bryce Young starting slow might be hurting Caleb Williams a little bit, but I don't think they're very similar much at all.
No. I
think it's more Drake is easier to compare to some guys that are doing well. I think Joe Burrow is like you just look at it, there's cycles of things and it's a copycat league. Right? You want a little bit of heft. You want a little bit of size. Drake Maye has it. Also, you're looking at some of the winning quarterbacks from college and they're not necessarily it's easier to promote Drake Maye after 2 bad losses when you look at the NFL and go, wait a second, a lot of these guys didn't win a ton in college, right?
Yeah.
Justin Herbert was never really in a national championship race. He's doing just fine, right? Patrick Mahomes. We could list a whole bunch. Josh Allen. You could list a whole bunch of them. Josh Allen wasn't winning a ton and had bad stats at Wyoming.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, maybe it's not horrendous that he lost to Georgia Tech, especially when he put up 42 points and threw for a bunch of yards and ran for a couple. I do think it's interesting that everyone seems to be, when it comes to putting Drake Maye above Caleb Williams, it is very much I'm going to take the steps into the pool rather than I'm going to go off the diving board into the deep end, into the pool, from analysts and draft experts around the country. Right? There was the couple of weeks of, I'm hearing that Drake might be above Caleb Williams. I talked to somebody else who may have put Drake Maye above Caleb Williams. Let me dip my toe on the first step of this pool. Okay, all right, I'm seeing it. I'm hearing it. And then slowly more to like, I actually really like Drake Maye. I think he's I have him equal with Caleb Williams. And now we're just now getting to the point where you tips over and you're like, this is a point you're maybe maybe a little bit more than waist deep into the pool, and you're finally like, all right, I'm diving under. Like, I've made it this far, I might as well go the distance, and now I'm gonna get my hair wet, and you dive in. It's going to be a really interesting rundown. It's going to be a really interesting countdown to the draft with the players at the top, and it's going to be with the teams at the top. If Arizona has the number 1 pick, and they're going quarterback, let's say they move on from Kyler or they decide they're moving on from Kyler. Actually, that alone is an interesting question. So let's just say that interesting question gets answered with they're moving on from Kyler. Do they go Caleb Williams, who's a more mobile guy, or do they say, we just had a mobile quarterback here, it didn't work, let's go for Drake Maye, who, by the way, is mobile in his own right? Or do they say, we'll stick with Kyler, we'll go Marvin Harrison Jr., or we'll trade back? If the Chicago Bears, same thing, right? They just had a mobile quarterback. What are they looking for if they get the number 1 overall pick? There's a lot of interesting questions leading up to the draft. And what looked like, a month ago, 2 months ago, it looked like it was going to be ho-hum, Caleb Williams goes 1, Drake Maye goes 2 or 3, depending on who needs a quarterback, and Marvin Harrison Jr. is 2 or 3, depending on who needs a quarterback, and then from that point on, we'll figure it out. It doesn't look like it's going to be ho-hum anymore. There could be some shakeups. There could be some surprises, which is always more fun. Especially when you're the Panthers, because you don't want it to be super obvious who the best players are if you're giving up a top 3 pick.
I know we only have 2 minutes left here, but I know the obvious ones.
You're going to do this to me again?
Yeah, no. But who do you think might actually make a splash move like the Panthers did this past year and move up, jump to 1 or 2 to take either one of these guys? We know that Arizona and Chicago are probably going to be looking for somebody if Arizona decides to move on from Kyler Murray. But let's say they don't, because they can't move that contract.
How much would
Who jumps up?
Well, the hard part is, then it depends who's number 2.
Yeah.
Because, I would, if I had to trade up for a quarterback, I would very much feel comfortable with Caleb or Drake.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much I would pay to go get the first one, right? Knowing that the second one is there, unless whoever's drafting second definitely needs a quarterback. Then all of a sudden the value goes through the roof again. I would trade a lot for either of them. I would also, and I said this pre-season, just so everybody knows, I'm not reorganizing history. If I needed a quarterback, I would have made sure I bottomed out this year. Because the better scenario is not needing to trade up to get one of them, to already be there. So I would have, if I needed a quarterback and I wasn't a contender this year, you better believe I'd be very, very bad this year. And not like telling my coach and players to stink, just by organizing a team of young players that I want to see how they can do, but they probably don't have a realistic chance of winning. You can say it's ugly. You can say it's not the way to play. I would call it franchise planning and forward thinking and say I'm going to be bad for 1 year so I can be good for 20 years.
Okay, so give me a team.
That would trade up?
Yeah. That might be 10, but wants to jump up.
Tampa Bay.
Okay.
Tennessee.
And then we got Will Levis?
Well, depending on Will Levis, Washington. Sam Howell. There's a handful. Atlanta. If Matt Stafford retires, the Rams.
Oh, there you go.
Do they have their first pick? I feel like they never do.
Yeah, they do.